voiceover tone. Calm, serious, slightly dramatic, with intelligent pauses. Have you ever wondered how one of the most boring-looking machines in history, a bunch of wooden blocks, screws, and ink, managed to start a revolution that still shapes your life today? No? Well, welcome to the boring history of the modern world, where the boring isn't really that boring. Today we're diving into the dusty world of the printing press. Not sexy, not loud, not shiny, but it might just be the most powerful invention you never cared about. Let's rewind. Year 1440. Place: Mainz, Germany. A goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg is broke. Not a little tight on cash broke. We're talking bankrupt, the kind of broke that ruins lives. But Gutenberg had an idea. Not a new idea, mind you. The Chinese had been printing books for centuries using woodblocks. The Koreans had even created movable metal type. But Europe? Europe was stuck in the slow lane. Books were copied by hand, one painful letter at a time. It took months to make one book, and only the rich could afford them. Gutenberg wanted to change that, and he did. Not by inventing something new, but by remixing old ideas in a way no one else had. Metal, movable type, oil-based ink, a wine press converted into a machine of mass education. Genius? Maybe. Accident? Probably. But what happened next was anything but boring. Scene: a cramped workshop in the back streets of Mainz. Gutenberg works in secret. He's paranoid someone might steal his idea. He borrows money. A lot of it. He hires craftsmen. He builds letter molds. And in 1455, he prints something that no one in Europe had ever seen before. The Gutenberg Bible. It looked like a handwritten manuscript, but it wasn't. It was printed, mass-produced, identical copies. 180 of them. The world would never be the same. What did it change? Everything. Because when books became cheap, ideas became dangerous. Suddenly, monks weren't the only ones with access to scripture. Peasants could read, merchants could learn, scientists could argue. And Martin Luther? He nailed his 95 Theses to a church door and used Gutenberg's press to print thousands of copies. The Reformation didn't spread by word of mouth. It spread by press. The printing press didn't just create books. It created opinions, movements, revolutions, and maybe your YouTube comment section too. Soft, ironic beat. Because once people started reading, they started questioning. And when they started questioning, they wanted change. From the Renaissance, to the scientific revolution, to democracy itself, Gutenberg's boring box of metal letters was behind it all. And the irony? He died broke, sued by his investor, forgotten by history. For a while. But his invention, it became the beating heart of modern civilization. So the next time someone tells you history is boring, ask them if they've ever read a book, and thank Gutenberg for making that possible. Before men built empires with blood and fire, there was a time when women ruled not from behind the curtain, but from the throne itself. Centuries before the rise of patriarchal dominance, powerful women shaped laws, led armies, and birthed civilizations. This is not mythology. This is forgotten history. Today we pull back the veil and whisper the names they tried to erase. The Sumerian queen, Kubaba, c. 2500 BCE. VO. Long before Babylon rose from dust, there was Kubaba. A tavern keeper turned queen, the only woman on the Sumerian king list. In an age ruled by men and myth, she broke the mold and ruled Kish for 100 years, not by force, but by wisdom. Sumerians worshipped her legacy for centuries, yet today, even her name is unknown to most. Hatshepsut, the pharaoh who became a god, c. 1479, 1458 BCE, Vo-O. She wore the beard of kings and ruled Egypt for 2 decades. Hatshepsut didn't pretend to be a man. She redefined what it meant to be a ruler. Her reign brought peace, trade, and monumental architecture. Her steps echo through the sands of Deir el-Bahari. But after her death, men tried to chisel her out of history. Literally, they smashed her statues, erased her name. But history has a way of whispering back. Empress Wu Zetian, the only female emperor of China, 624-705 CE, VO. She began as a concubine. She rose to become the emperor, not empress, but emperor of all China. Wu Zetian's reign was ruthless and brilliant. She reformed the bureaucracy, strengthened the empire, and rewrote the rules. They said she used fear. But what dynasty wasn't built on fear? Today, she is painted as a villain in Chinese history books, but in her time, she was unstoppable. Amanirenas, the warrior queen of Kush, Nun c. 40 BCE, VO. The Romans feared her. Amanirenas, the one-eyed queen of Kush, led her people against Caesar Augustus, and won. When Rome pushed into Nubia, she pushed back harder. Statues of Caesar were buried in sand by her army. A blind eye, but unmatched vision. She negotiated peace with Rome on her terms. How many queens today can say the same? The Celtic Avenger, c. 60 CE, VO. Her daughters were violated. Her people slaughtered. And so, Boudica burned Roman cities to the ground. With fire in her eyes and vengeance in her heart, she led a rebellion that shook the empire. They say 70,000 Romans died. She wasn't just a queen. She was a revolution. And though she fell in battle, her legacy still rides the wind over the fields of Britain. VO. These were not wives of kings. They were kings. Not footnotes in a man's story, but authors of their own. The world before patriarchy was more complex than we're told. Power was not gendered. It was earned, and sometimes feared. This was the age of forgotten queens, and this is just the beginning. They were feared across the oceans, hunted by empires, branded as criminals, outlaws, and monsters. But what if I told you? Some of them didn't die at sea. Some pirates became kings. Act 1. The Myth of the Pirate King. Hollywood made pirates seem like drunk adventurers searching for gold. But in reality, piracy was a rebellion, a rejection of empire. And for a few men, it was a pathway to absolute power. Let's begin with one of the most terrifying names in history, Henry Every, a British sailor who mutinied against his own captain and pulled off the richest pirate heist in history. After looting a Muggle treasure ship, Every vanished. Some say he died broke, but secret records suggest he may have bribed his way into nobility and lived like a king under a new name. Act 2. The Pirate Sultan, Sayyid al-Harithi. In the 18th century, the Indian Ocean was ruled by a pirate sultan, Sayyid al-Harithi of Oman. He began as a corsair, attacking Portuguese ships, but as his reputation grew, so did his army. Eventually, he was offered the crown, not by theft, but by loyalty. He ruled Zanzibar and Muscat, built a navy stronger than many European powers, and redefined piracy as politics. Act 3. From pirate to emperor, Shi Lung. In China's waters, pirates weren't always outlaws. Meet Shi Lung, a Ming Dynasty naval officer turned pirate. After defecting, he formed his own fleet, not to rob, but to build an empire. When Taiwan stood against the Qing Dynasty, it was pirate turned Admiral Shi Lung who conquered it. For that, he was granted the title of Imperial Prince. Act 4. Why Kings Feared Pirates. Pirates had one thing that kings feared: freedom. They answered to no crown. They built floating democracies. They voted for their captains. They shared treasure equally. And they defied the idea that power had to be inherited. But the most dangerous pirates didn't just steal gold. They stole the future. By becoming kings, they proved that power could come from the sea, not the bloodline. So the next time you hear the word pirate, don't just picture a man with a sword and a flag. Picture a man who challenged empires and won.
They called it the Dark Ages, a time when Europe slept and knowledge died. But what if I told you this narrative is a lie? While castles crumbled and empires fell, something incredible was happening. In hidden libraries, in silent observatories, in the heart of forgotten civilizations. Welcome to the world of lost science from the so-called Dark Age. Darur, yahan hai part 5. Democracies before they told us democracy was born in ancient Greece. Athens, 508 BCE, the first real taste of rule by the people. But what if that wasn't true? What if history, real, messy history, had older stories to tell? Stories buried, forgotten, or maybe deliberately ignored, because democracy existed long before Greece. Let's dig into the democracies that came first. Section 1. Mesopotamia, the assembly of free men. Almost 2,000 years before Athenian democracy, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, ancient Mesopotamian city-states had popular assemblies. Ordinary citizens, not kings, voted on war, laws, and justice. Take the Sumerian city of Ur. They had 2 houses of government, one for elders, one for free men. If the king wanted war, he had to ask permission. If the people said no, there was no war. That's not just a ritual. That's real participatory power. Section 2. Have you ever wondered if the map hanging in your classroom is lying to you? Because the world you know might not be the world as it really is. Welcome to History Whisper. Today we uncover the shocking secrets hidden in the maps we trusted all our lives. Scene 1. The Mercator Projection, the biggest lie ever printed. The Mercator Projection, the most famous map used in schools, was created in 1569 by a Flemish cartographer named Gerardus Mercator. It was never meant to represent the real size of countries. It was meant for sea navigation. But the consequences? Africa, the second largest continent, appears smaller than Greenland, when in reality, Africa is 14 times larger. Europe and North America, inflated. South America and Asia, shrunk. Why? Because in a world ruled by empire, power had to look bigger on the map. Scene 2. Maps as tools of empire. Colonial powers didn't just conquer land. They redrew maps. British imperial maps placed London in the center of the world. Old Islamic maps like those by El-Idrisi put the south on top. Yes, south was up, because what's up or down isn't real. It's perspective, a choice, a political statement. Scene 3. The Phantom Islands that never existed. Have you heard of High Brazil, an island that appeared on European maps for centuries, said to be west of Ireland? Sailors claimed to see it through the mist, but it never existed. Or take Sandy Island in the South Pacific, visible on Google Maps until 2012, when scientists sailed there and found nothing. Maps carried myths, mistakes, and sometimes deliberate lies. Scene 4. The real borders of today, or not. Even today, borders are illusions. China and India dispute entire mountain ranges. Israel and Palestine draw maps that contradict each other. Kashmir exists, yet disappears from maps depending on where you're standing. Google changes its map depending on your IP address. What you see is not what someone in China or Russia sees. So, what is real? Scene 5. The rise of truthful maps and why they're hidden. Today, cartographers are fighting back. The Gall-Peters projection shows countries based on area, not power. It makes Africa huge and Europe small, exactly how it really is. But it was called ugly, distorted, because the truth looked wrong after centuries of lies. Closing scene, a map that reflects power, not geography. Maps are not just geography, they are power, propaganda, perspective. So next time you look at a map, ask yourself, who made this? What were they trying to make me believe? because the world is not what it seems. And sometimes, the biggest lies are printed in ink. They say history is written by the victors. But what if entire stories were never written at all? Today we unearth the buried horrors. Genocide so vast, yet so forgotten, they never made it to your school textbooks. Scene 1. Namibia, 1904. Long before the Holocaust. Germany tested its genocidal tactics in Namibia. The Herero and Nama people rose against colonial brutality. The German Empire responded with extermination. Over 80% of the Herero were wiped out. Tens of thousands perished in concentration camps, starved, beaten, and worked to death. But this genocide, it's barely a footnote in German history. Scene 2. The Congo Free State. King Leopold II of Belgium called it a civilizing mission. But what he unleashed was one of the most brutal colonial regimes ever known. In the Congo Free State, between 10 to 15 million people died. Hands were chopped off for missing rubber quotas. Villages were torched. Children were mutilated. And the world looked away. To this day, there's no formal recognition of this genocide. Scene 3. The Armenian Genocide, 1915. The Ottoman Empire began the systematic extermination of Armenians. Men were shot. Women and children were forced on death marches through the desert. Over 1.5 million Armenians died. Turkey denies it to this day. Calling it genocide is illegal in some Turkish circles. Scene 4. Bangladesh, 1971. In just 9 months during the War of Independence, Pakistan's military killed an estimated 300,000 to 3 million people in East Pakistan. Now Bangladesh. Mass rapes, targeted killings of intellectuals, and ethnic cleansing of Hindus and Bengalis. The world watched in silence. No Nuremberg, no justice. Scene 5. Guatemala. In the 1980s, the Guatemalan military led a campaign against the indigenous Maya. Over 200,000 were killed. Villages were erased. It was genocide, officially declared decades later. But how many documentaries have you seen about it? Scene 6. Why we forget erased. Genocides aren't accidents. They're inconvenient truths, buried under diplomacy, denial, and distraction. Because admitting to genocide means facing the shame, paying reparations, and rewriting history books. But history doesn't disappear just because we stop talking about it. The ghosts remain, and now you've heard their stories. They weren't built on steel or gunpowder, but on faith. Long before modern nation-states and colonial powers, there existed empires whose foundations were spiritual, not territorial. These were civilizations held together not by borders, but by belief, by sacred texts, rituals, and transcendent philosophies. Let's begin with Tibet, once ruled by monk kings, where the Dalai Lama wasn't just a spiritual leader, but the head of state. For centuries, Tibetan governance flowed from monasteries. Laws were written in prayer halls, and armies marched under the shadow of sacred mountains. Then there was the Caliphate, a vast Islamic empire that, at its height, stretched from Spain to India. But beyond conquests and caliphs, it spread libraries, astronomy, medicine, and poetry, all inspired by the Quran. It was a civilization where science and spirituality weren't at odds, but allies. In medieval Europe, while kings fought bloody wars, the Catholic Church quietly built an empire of its own. With the Pope as its emperor, Rome held power over emperors and peasants alike. It crowned kings and cast down empires, not with armies, but with anathemas. And deep in the African Sahel, the Mali Empire thrived under the rule of Mansa Musa, a devout Muslim who, on his pilgrimage to Mecca, gave away so much gold, it collapsed economies. His empire blended gold with God, faith with wealth. These were not empires obsessed with borders. They were built on stories, scriptures, and souls. They taught us that power doesn't always come from swords. Sometimes it comes from silence, from surrender, from spirit. History forgot them, but faith remembers. They told us colonization brought civilization. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. Before the British arrived in India, it was one of the richest regions on Earth, contributing over 25% of the world's GDP. They didn't come to uplift, they came to exploit. They took raw materials, destroyed local industries, and taxed people into poverty. The same story repeated in Africa. European powers drew fake borders, pitting tribes against each other to rule through chaos. They said they were bringing Christianity and order. But behind the churches came guns, forced labor, and famine. What about the Americas? Indigenous civilizations had cities, calendars, and governments long before Columbus, but schools still teach that discovery began with him. Even language was a weapon. Colonizers erased native tongues, outlawed traditions, and called entire cultures savage. They made people believe that their history began with slavery and colonization. But that's the lie. Your history is older, your roots are deeper, and your identity is not a gift from the empire. They told us colonization brought civilization. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. Before the British arrived in India, it was one of the richest regions on Earth, contributing over 25% of the world's GDP. They didn't come to uplift, they came to exploit. They took raw materials, destroyed local industries, and taxed people into poverty. The same story repeated in Africa. European powers drew fake borders, pitting tribes against each other to rule through chaos. They said they were bringing Christianity and order. But behind the churches came guns, forced labor, and famine. What about the Americas? Indigenous civilizations had cities, calendars, and governments long before Columbus. But schools still teach that discovery began with him. Even language was a weapon. Colonizers erased native tongues, outlawed traditions, and called entire cultures savage. They made people believe that their history began with slavery and colonization. But that's the lie. Your history is older, your roots are deeper, and your identity is not a gift from the empire. History often praises kings, empires, and revolutions. But some warriors were too powerful, too terrifying, even for the books. These are the forgotten titans, the ones history chose to fear and erase. Let's uncover them. Scene 1. The women who led armies. Boudica, a Celtic queen who led an uprising against the Roman Empire. She nearly burned London to the ground. Rome called her a barbarian, but to her people she was a legend. Scene 2. African conquerors you've never heard of. Nzinga of Ndongo, a queen-turned-military strategist who resisted Portuguese colonizers for decades. Her armies used guerrilla tactics long before the term existed. Her diplomacy, ruthless. Her resistance, unforgettable. Scene 3. The Mongol Shadow. Everyone knows Genghis Khan, but what about Subutai, the mastermind behind dozens of Mongol victories? He led campaigns across 3 continents at the same time. Europe wasn't just invaded, it was humbled. Scene 4. The Islamic warrior who terrified Europe. Tariq ibn Ziyad, a Berber commander who crossed into Spain with a small army and changed history. The Rock of Gibraltar is named after him. He didn't just win battles, he shook entire civilizations. Scene 5. Indigenous power forgotten. Tupac Amaru, the last Incan rebel who resisted Spanish conquest. Tortured, executed, but never erased from his people's memory. He sparked resistance that would live for centuries. These warriors didn't just fight for power. They fought for survival, for freedom, for their people. And that's why history feared them. Because real power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it raises a sword and dares the empire to remember. Some civilizations didn't rise into the sky. They disappeared beneath the earth. Entire cities hidden, buried, or erased. Let's uncover the lost worlds beneath our feet. Scene 1. Derinkuyu, Turkey. Imagine a city underground, large enough to hide 20,000 people, complete with schools, stables, wells, and ventilation shafts. Derinkuyu wasn't just shelter, it was survival, built to hide from invaders. Its secrets still baffle modern engineers. Scene 2. The Hypogeum of Malta. A 6,000-year-old underground temple, Carved entirely by hand, its chambers are acoustically perfect. One whisper can echo across the entire structure. Scientists can't explain how it was made, but the silence it holds is ancient. Scene 3. The subterranean tunnels of South America. From Peru to Argentina, vast underground tunnel systems connect ancient ruins. Some say they were built by the Incas. Others claim they predate even them. Who built them? Why? No one knows. Scene 4. The lost city of Ubar. Called the Atlantis of the Sands, a rich desert city full of towers, trade, and wealth. One day it vanished, swallowed by the earth, found by satellite, buried beneath Oman's deserts. Some say it was cursed. Scene 5. Submerged civilizations. Dwarka, India. An entire city submerged under the sea, its layout still visible. Was it real? Mythology says it was built by Lord Krishna, but divers found temples, walls, proof of a thriving city now lost to the waves. These civilizations weren't just forgotten. They were buried, silenced, erased. But stone remembers, and beneath our feet, history is still alive. History wasn't always written by the victors. Sometimes it was rewritten to erase the truth. Let's talk about race, not as we were told, but as it really was. Scene 1. Ancient Egypt, not what you were taught. For centuries, textbooks showed light-skinned pharaohs, but ancient art, DNA, and mummies tell a different story. The people of Kemet, black, brilliant, and powerful. Their features erased in museums. Their identity rewritten. Scene 2. The Moors of Europe. Did you know that black Muslims ruled parts of Spain for 700 years? They brought science, astronomy, architecture. Europe's Renaissance owes much to them, yet they're missing from most history books. Why? Scene 3. The Olmec heads of Mesoamerica. Carved over 3,000 years ago, these massive stone heads show features that don't match today's native populations. Some scholars saw African influence, but were quickly dismissed. Who decided what was acceptable history? Scene 4. The whitening of saints and saviors. Jesus in art, blue eyes, pale skin, but he was a Jewish man from the Middle East. So where did the white image come from? Power, colonization, control, to make divinity look familiar to conquerors. Scene 5. Forgotten Black Kingdoms. The Empire of Mali, rich in gold, knowledge, and trade. Timbuktu was a hub of learning before most of Europe had universities, but we rarely hear about it because it doesn't fit the narrative of primitive Africa. Race is not just biology, it's history, shaped, sculpted, and sometimes silenced. But the truth? It's still there, in ruins, scrolls, and DNA. All you have to do is look past the lie. The secret police that shaped empires. In every powerful empire, there's always been an invisible hand, a force you never read about in school, one that didn't wear crowns or sit on thrones, but pulled the strings from behind shadows. Welcome to the world of secret police, not the ones you think you know, but the ones that built, sustained, and sometimes toppled entire empires. Let's go back to ancient Persia. Before MI6, before the CIA, there were the eyes and ears of the king, a network of spies and informants under Darius the Great. Their job, watch governors, watch priests, watch soldiers, and sometimes watch the king himself. They didn't carry weapons, they carried secrets. Fast forward to the Roman Empire. While gladiators fought in the arenas, a group called the Frumentari quietly roamed the cities. Originally grain officials, they evolved into elite undercover agents. Disguised as merchants, they tracked political threats, snuffed out rebellions, and kept tabs on senators. One whisper, one scroll, could lead to execution, but nothing matched the fear of the Byzantine Empire's secret police. Known as the Basilikoi Anthropoi, men of the emperor. They weren't just spies, they were trained interrogators, poisoners, and blackmailers. Their reach extended from Constantinople to Egypt, from Sicily to Syria. They infiltrated enemy courts. They turned rivals into pawns. And if you said the wrong thing in a tavern, They made sure no one ever found your body. Still think intelligence is a modern game? In Mughal India, Akbar the Great ran a spy network so efficient it said he knew about assassination plots before his enemies did. Disguised as Sufis, traders, or musicians, his agents reported everything, from movements of enemy armies to rumors whispered in the slums. Then came Imperial China. The Jinyue, or Embroidered Uniform Guard, were perhaps the most feared secret police in history. Appointed directly by the Ming Emperor, they had the power to arrest anyone, including top generals and ministers. No trial, no appeal, just silence. They operated in the shadows, and if they knocked at your door at midnight, you were already considered dead. But even in the modern world, secret police didn't vanish. They evolved. The Cheka of Soviet Russia, later known as the KGB, rewrote the playbook on psychological warfare, surveillance, and political purges. Millions vanished during Stalin's reign, many because of anonymous reports, fabricated confessions, or accidents nobody questioned. In East Germany, the Stasi created one of the most extensive surveillance states ever. 1 in 6 citizens was an informant. Imagine, your barber, your priest, your spouse, all writing reports about you. But here's the twist. While history books talk endlessly about kings, wars, and revolutions, they barely mention these invisible architects of empire. Why? Because every ruler, whether benevolent or brutal, needed them, relied on them, feared them. Secret police were not just guardians of the state. They were the pulse, the nerve system, the invisible blade beneath the velvet glove. So next time you think of history's most powerful empires, don't just look at the ones who wore crowns. Look at the ones who moved in silence and left no footprints. Because sometimes the greatest forces in history never show up in the pages at all. The secret libraries of the ancient world. Have you ever wondered how much ancient knowledge we've truly lost? Not due to time, but because someone deliberately hid it or destroyed it. Welcome to a world of secret libraries, hidden deep beneath temples, deserts, and ruins. Places where ancient civilizations stored truths too powerful or too dangerous for common eyes. Let's begin with Egypt. Everyone knows about the Library of Alexandria, but few know that beneath the Temple of Edfu, there are rumors of scrolls dating back to the mythical Zep Tepi era, a time when gods ruled the earth. Priests swore oaths to guard these scrolls, which held blueprints for lost technologies, forgotten histories, and cosmic maps. In Timbuktu, a city in Mali, over 700,000 ancient manuscripts were hidden in family vaults for centuries. These weren't just religious texts. They included astronomy, medicine, law, and even feminist philosophy. During colonial times, many were smuggled or burned, but locals risked their lives to protect what remained. Then there's the Vatican Secret Archives, one of the most secure collections in the world. Stretching over 50 miles of shelving, it's rumored to contain lost gospels, the true story of Jesus, early alien contact records, and texts about the giants mentioned in the Bible. Only a handful of scholars are ever allowed inside, and even they aren't told everything. In India, ancient texts like the Vaimanika Shastra describe flying machines, vimanas, powered by anti-gravity engines. These weren't fiction. Some claim that these manuscripts were hidden by royal families during British rule, or taken by secret intelligence agencies. And what about the Library of Ashurbanipal in Mesopotamia? Thousands of clay tablets were discovered, detailing everything from math to magic to planetary movements. Some tablets mention an ancient planet that once passed near Earth, causing global floods. Sound familiar? These libraries weren't just for reading, they were gateways to forgotten knowledge. Knowledge that could reshape our view of humanity, religion, and science. So why were they hidden? Because those in power feared them. Because if ordinary people had access to these truths, it would collapse the myths that empires and religions were built on. They say knowledge is power, but what if some knowledge was too powerful, so dangerous, so transformative, that entire civilizations agreed to bury it forever? Welcome to the forbidden knowledge of the ancient world. Thousands of years before modern science, ancient civilizations from Sumer to the Indus Valley possessed knowledge we still struggle to explain today. Stone temples aligned perfectly with star constellations. Megaliths weighing hundreds of tons were transported without modern machinery. Surgical instruments were discovered in ruins over 5,000 years old. Coincidence or something intentionally hidden? Let's begin with the Library of Alexandria, the most famous case of lost knowledge. Said to have stored over 700,000 scrolls, it held mathematics, astronomy, medicine, even texts on flight, energy, and machines. When it burned, we didn't just lose paper. We lost centuries of scientific advancement. But what if some of those scrolls survived? In 1945, in a cave near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a farmer discovered ancient manuscripts sealed in jars. Among them were lost teachings on the cosmos, consciousness, and the origins of humanity. These texts, hidden for centuries, spoke of knowledge that threatened empires and religious systems, knowledge that could awaken the masses. So who wanted this wisdom buried? In ancient India, texts like the Vedas describe flying machines called vimanas, nuclear-like weapons, and complex technologies. These weren't myths. The descriptions include fuel types, aerial combat tactics, and anti-gravity propulsion. Modern scientists still struggle to decode the math embedded in these scriptures. Similarly, in pre-Columbian South America, the Nazca lines, gigantic geoglyphs visible only from the sky, seem to serve no religious or agricultural purpose. Were they ancient landing pads? Markers for something else? And then there's Göbekli Tepe, a 12,000-year-old temple complex in modern-day Turkey, built before agriculture or cities were supposed to exist. The carvings there suggest knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and even extinction-level events. How could humans, labeled as primitive hunters, build something so advanced? Let's not forget the Baghdad Battery, an artifact from ancient Mesopotamia resembling a modern-day battery, or the Antikythera mechanism from Greece, a 2,000-year-old computer used to calculate planetary motion. These weren't isolated cases. They hint at a larger truth, that ancient civilizations knew far more than we've been told. So why is this knowledge forbidden? Because it challenges our timeline. It threatens the story we've been taught, that history moves in one straight line, from cavemen to computers. But if advanced knowledge existed long before the industrial age, then something or someone caused humanity to forget. Massive cataclysms, elite suppression, lost continents like Atlantis. Imagine if ancient teachings on consciousness, energy, healing, and space travel were publicly available today. Would it revolutionize science? Or destroy the systems built on keeping you uninformed? This isn't just about history, it's about control. Because when you erase knowledge, you erase power. And when you rediscover it, you reclaim your destiny. Power doesn't just pass through elections, coups, or wars. Sometimes it moves quietly through blood, family names, lineages, sacred claims. Welcome to the story of hidden bloodlines. The families who say they were born to rule, and the ones who actually did. Scene 1: Kings by divine right. For centuries, monarchs across Europe justified their rule through divine blood. Not popularity, not competence. Blood. From the Capetians of France to the Habsburgs of Austria, power was inherited, intermarried, and locked inside a maze of dynastic treaties. The result? A Europe where almost every royal house was related, and the common people were told, "You cannot rule because you were not born to." But the bloodlines weren't just about Europe. Scene 2: Claiming descent from the Prophet, the Sun, and the gods in the Muslim world, Sayyids and Sharifs claimed descent from the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, and with that, a spiritual authority that could override politics itself. In Japan, the Yamato dynasty declared descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu, making the emperor not just a ruler, but a living deity until 1946. In Tibet, reincarnated lamas formed a spiritual bloodline, traced not through DNA, but through destiny. choosing successors as eternal embodiments of power. Bloodlines could be biological, mythological, or metaphysical, but they all served one purpose: legitimacy. Scene 3. The Merovingians, the Grail, and the myths of Europe. Whispers of a sacred bloodline run through medieval Europe, from the Merovingian kings of the Franks to the legends recycled in the Da Vinci Code. The claim? That a secret bloodline carried divine legitimacy, protected for centuries by secret societies, encoded in symbols, hidden in plain sight. Whether true or not, one thing is clear: Europe's elites have always used blood, real or imagined, as the ultimate weapon of power. Scene 4. Steppe dynasties and nomadic nobility. On the Eurasian steppe, the Ashina clan of the Gökturks, the Borjigan clan of Genghis Khan, they didn't just conquer empires. They embedded their bloodlines into every kingdom they touched. Centuries later, Mongol and Turkic royal blood still runs through Central Asia, the Middle East, even parts of South Asia and Eastern Europe. Empires fall, bloodlines linger. Scene 5. The colonial bloodlines. No one talks about when Europe colonized Africa, Asia, and the Americas. They didn't just take land. They left names, heirs, and mixed lineages. Sometimes acknowledged, most times denied. In Latin America, entire political classes grew from Criollo elites, European blood, local birth. In South Asia, princely states were often protected or replaced through rulers loyal by blood or marriage. Colonialism didn't end with flags coming down. It morphed into genealogies of influence. Scene 6. Modern power, old blood. Today we say we live in democracies, we vote, we debate, we protest, but look closely. Banking dynasties, industrial houses, political families, they don't disappear. They inherit boards, chairs, trusts, foundations, new thrones, same blood. Sometimes the surname changes. The legacy doesn't. Scene 7. The algorithm of ancestry. In the age of DNA testing and open genealogies, bloodlines are no longer secret. We can trace where kings and commoners intersect. And yet, the most powerful families in the world remain the most opaque, because true power doesn't publish a family tree. It edits history. Empires rise, empires fall, but bloodlines adapt. Sometimes they crown themselves. Sometimes they hide in boardrooms. Sometimes they whisper through myths. You were told that power lives in palaces, parliaments, and presidencies. But sometimes it lives in veins. And the hardest thing to overthrow is a story written in blood. For most of human history, time was not measured in minutes or hours. It was felt in the rising sun, the crow of a rooster, or the blooming of flowers. But then came the timekeepers, forgotten civilizations and individuals who didn't just track time. They redefined how we live through it. Let's travel back thousands of years to when ancient Ethiopia used a 13-month calendar, and their year started in what we call September. For Ethiopians, it's still 2017, not 2025. They kept their own rhythm, rejecting the imposed Western calendar. Why does no one talk about this? In pre-Islamic Arabia, time wasn't ruled by clocks. The Bedouins used the stars and the moon, crafting an intricate lunar calendar so accurate it rivaled early European attempts. Today, that knowledge has been pushed aside, labeled primitive. But was it? Then there's the Mayan civilization, whose long count calendar predicted astronomical events with mathematical precision. They calculated solar eclipses, planetary movements, and even the galactic center, centuries before telescopes. So how did we come to believe they thought the world would end in 2012? That myth served as a distraction, hiding their brilliance. Meanwhile, in ancient China, the water clocks of Zhongheng were so precise, emperors based laws, taxes, and harvests on them. Entire dynasties synchronized life through gears and drips, but history books still overcredit the West for inventing mechanical timekeeping. Fast forward to medieval Islamic civilizations, where time became sacred. Mosques employed muwaqqits, trained astronomers to calculate prayer times using sundials and astrolabes. These weren't just religious figures. They were elite scientists, mastering celestial timekeeping when most of Europe was still in the Dark Ages. And then came the colonial clock. European empires standardized time zones, not for accuracy, but for control. The British needed synchronized railways to manage their empire. The French imposed time laws in Algeria to erase local customs. What we call universal time is not universal, it's political. Even today, indigenous tribes in the Amazon and Australian outback measure time by nature, by when fish spawn or birds migrate. Their wisdom survives, barely, in oral traditions, not textbooks. So ask yourself, who decides what time is? Whose clock are you living by? And what ancient knowledge did we lose when we surrendered our own rhythms to the ticking of a colonizer's clock? Imagine a world where cities rose from the ground, not by the command of kings, but through the will of the people. No crowns, no palaces, no ruling bloodlines. And yet, order thrived, prosperity bloomed, civilization endured. Welcome to the forgotten world of stateless societies, communities that challenge everything we think we know about ancient power. Act 1. The illusion of authority. History books often teach us that without rulers, chaos reigns, that kings were necessary to organize humanity. But what if this belief is a lie passed down by empires to justify domination? Long before monarchs carved their names into stone, there were cultures that flourished, without hierarchy, without armies, and without coercion. Throughout history, the spotlight of invention has often focused on a select few: Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Thomas Edison. But what about the innovators whose names were erased, their work buried, or their cultures destroyed before recognition could ever take root? This is the story of forgotten inventors, those who revolutionized the world long before the world was ready to remember them. The weaver of machines, ancient India. Before the mechanical loom appeared in 18th century Britain, evidence points to automated spinning devices existing in ancient India as early as 500 BCE. Some Sanskrit texts, like the Arthashastra, describe complex pulley and wheel systems used in textile production, long before the West's Industrial Revolution. One such mythical figure was Maitreyi, a woman scholar and inventor from the Vedic period, who was believed to have designed a system for water-powered looms in rural kingdoms. Though her name appears in ancient texts, her contributions are often labeled symbolic, with no formal scientific credit. Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, the first scientist? History tells us who invented what, but rarely who did it first, or who got erased. Long before the Wright brothers took flight in 1903, an Indian man named Shivkar Bapuji Talpade was said to have flown an aircraft called Marutsaka in 1895 using ancient Vedic technology. His achievement, ignored and ridiculed. Centuries earlier, Abbas ibn Firnas, a Muslim polymath from 9th century Spain, made gliding experiments long before Leonardo da Vinci's flying machines were even imagined. Speaking of da Vinci, he's often praised as a visionary of mechanical inventions. But how often are we told that the Banu Musa brothers from 9th century Baghdad wrote an entire book of mechanical devices 600 years before him? Then there's Garrett Morgan, the black inventor who created the gas mask and the modern traffic signal. Yet even today, schoolbooks barely whisper his name. Did you know the ancient Chinese invented the seismograph in 132 AD, using dragons and toads to detect earthquakes? Or that an African man named Imhotep, born over 4,000 years ago in Egypt, was the first known physician, long before Hippocrates, whom we now call the father of medicine. Many of these breakthroughs were downplayed, rewritten, or even stolen, either because of race, colonization, or political motives. But the pattern is clear. When invention comes from the West, it's called genius. When it comes from the rest, it's often called myth. How many other technologies, from Damascus steel to ancient batteries in Baghdad, have been lost, buried, or deliberately dismissed? What else did they hide? Because rewriting history isn't just about power, it's about erasing who truly shaped our world. They called it science, but it was psychological warfare on their own people. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA launched Project MK-Ultra, a secret program that experimented on humans to develop mind control without their consent. Ordinary citizens, prisoners, mental patients, even students were given LSD, electroshock, sleep deprivation, and worse, all in the name of controlling behavior. Some were kept in drug states for months. A Canadian doctor, funded by the CIA, tried to erase a woman's personality using recordings and electroshock. She forgot how to walk, talk, or feed herself. She never recovered. In one experiment, they placed people in total sensory isolation, pumping white noise for weeks, just to see how long it would take to break their minds. Why? Because they believed if you can break a mind, you can build a slave. Even after the project was exposed in the 1970s, only a fraction of the documents survived. Most were deliberately destroyed. They said it was over. But whispers continued. From unexplained experiments in Guantanamo Bay, to strange behavioral studies in schools and prisons, to drugs tested in secret on unsuspecting cities, the real question isn't just, what did they do? It's, what are they still doing? Because if the mind is the final battlefield, then these programs weren't abandoned. They just went underground. They say every hospital has its secrets, but some secrets are kept alive. In the outskirts of Baltimore stands an old psychiatric facility. From the outside, it looks like any other abandoned asylum. Cracked bricks, broken windows, graffiti claiming ghosts still roam the halls. But if you speak to the former staff in hushed voices, they'll tell you about Ward 6. Not listed on any blueprint, no patient records, no access, just Ward 6. For years, rumors spread that a group of unregistered patients were kept there, not for treatment, but for testing. Whispered phrases like behavioral programming, deep state funding, and MK-Ultra spillover were dismissed as conspiracy theories. But then came a nurse, whom we'll call Eliza. Eliza had worked at the hospital for 5 years. One night during a shift change, she noticed a heavily secured elevator was active, one she had never seen used. It went below the main levels, below the morgue. She swiped her badge. Denied. Security clearance error. Curiosity turned to obsession. A week later, while assisting a senior doctor during an emergency psychotic episode, she noticed his ID badge was still on the table. She took it. That same night, she used it on the restricted elevator. The doors creaked open into a corridor untouched by time, dimly lit, humming with electricity. The walls were padded but stained, as if someone had tried to scratch or bleed their way out. At the end was a thick, bolted door. She used the doctor's key card. The door opened. Inside, she found 6 beds, each occupied by silent, catatonic individuals. Eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. No blinking, no recognition. Electrodes drilled into their temples, tubes keeping their bodies alive, machines printing out unreadable waveforms. One monitor displayed looping footage from a black and white screen. A man screaming, then smiling, then screaming again, repeating endlessly. Suddenly, a voice behind her whispered, "You weren't supposed to see this." She turned. A man in a suit, government issue, no ID, no expression. He pressed a needle into her neck. She woke up 48 hours later, in her own bed, no memory of how she got home. The doctor whose badge she stole? Gone. Transferred. No records. She quit the hospital, moved out of state, but strange things began happening. Her phone would buzz at 3:33 a.m. every night. No caller ID, just silence. Her emails would vanish mid-sentence. Her dog died mysteriously, organs liquefied as if exposed to radiation. She went public with her story. Once, a podcast. It got traction. Then the episode disappeared. The hosts issued an apology. "We got it wrong," they said. But Eliza knew the truth. Ward 6 was real. And those patients, they weren't mentally ill. They were the result of programming experiments, attempts to create obedient vessels, minds wiped clean and replaced with commands. Not killers, not spies. Something worse, dormant weapons waiting for activation. She believes Ward 6 still exists, moved, renamed, protected by layers of legal silence. But the test subjects? They're out there, in cities, in schools, among us. And one day when the signal is sent, they will wake up, not remembering who they are, only what they have been told to do. The mind control of empires. What if I told you some of the most powerful empires in history didn't need chains, whips, or swords to control people? What if the true battlefield was the human mind? From the Roman Empire's bread and circuses, to the British Empire's re-engineering of languages, to modern propaganda machines that shape entire generations. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented manipulation. This is how empires mastered control, not of land, but of thought. Segment 1. The Roman Theater of Distraction. It began centuries ago. The Roman Empire, stretched thin by wars and rebellions, discovered a secret more powerful than its legions: distraction. They gave the poor bread and circuses, free food and violent entertainment, to keep them from asking dangerous questions about power, poverty, and corruption. The Colosseum became more than a stadium. It became a mental firewall, keeping the masses entertained, emotionally exhausted, and easy to rule. When a people's focus is hijacked, their resistance fades. Segment 2. The Script of Silence. Colonial Education Systems. Fast forward to the 18th and 19th centuries. As the British, French, Dutch, and Spanish empires spread, they didn't just colonize land. They colonized language, curriculum, and history itself. They created education systems in Africa, Asia, and the Americas that taught native children to idolize European thinkers, forget their indigenous wisdom, and see their own skin, accent, and culture as inferior. Imagine growing up in India and learning more about Queen Victoria than Rani Lakshmibai. Imagine speaking your language in class and getting punished for it. The mind was the first target, because if you control what people believe about themselves, you never need to control their bodies. Segment 3. Scientific Racism. The IQ. Lie in the late 19th and early 20th century, a dangerous idea emerged that intelligence was fixed, measurable, and racial. Using fake science like craniometry and eugenics, empires justified slavery, segregation, and genocide, claiming that Black, brown, and indigenous peoples were less evolved. In Nazi Germany, these lies became policy. In the US, they became immigration laws. In schools across the world, they became textbooks. This wasn't bad science. This was a mind control dressed in a lab coat. Segment 4. Modern Propaganda. The Age of Consent. In the 20th century, control moved from books to screens. Governments and corporations began to study psychology and media like never before. Enter Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the man who turned psychological manipulation into public relations. He convinced women that smoking was freedom. He helped overthrow a Guatemalan government for a fruit company. He proved one thing: if you control perception, you control reality. Today, propaganda doesn't look like black and white posters. It looks like algorithms, news feeds, and targeted ads. And the line between truth and manipulation, almost invisible. Segment 5. The Schooling Matrix. Obedience over curiosity. Ask yourself, why do most schools reward obedience over questioning, teach what to think, not how to think, prepare you for a job, not freedom? This is not accidental. The modern school system, especially in industrial nations, was built to create compliant workers, not liberated minds. It was inspired by the Prussian model, a system designed to make soldiers and factory workers who followed orders. Creativity was a threat. Doubt was rebellion. Conformity became the highest virtue. What better way to maintain an empire than to train the next generation to never question it? Segment 6. The New Empire. Data and behavior. Today's empire has no emperor, no flag, no throne. It exists in your pocket, on your screen, in your habits. Big tech collects every click, every pause, every scroll. They know what excites you, scares you, even who you might vote for. You are not the customer. You are the product. Modern empires don't need soldiers. They need coders, not whips, but Wi-Fi. Your mind is the battlefield, and the war is 24/7. Final reflection. Throughout history, empires evolved, but their goal remained the same: control. Not always by sword or chain, but by idea, by narrative, by emotion. So the next time you feel outraged, afraid, or certain about something, pause. Ask, whose idea is this? Who profits from my belief? Because the most powerful kind of mind control is the kind that feels like free will. History is not just written by victors, it is sometimes burned by them. Throughout the ages, empires have erased the past not just by rewriting stories, but by torching libraries, smashing tablets, and silencing knowledge. Part 24 explores the forgotten intellectual legacies of ancient civilizations, what they knew, what we've lost, and who ensured we'd never read it. Chapter 1. The Burning of the Great Library of Alexandria, the most iconic example of intellectual genocide. The Library of Alexandria, established in Egypt around the 3rd century BCE under the Ptolemaic dynasty, was said to have housed up to 500,000 scrolls from across Mesopotamia, Persia, Greece, India, and Africa. Philosophers, scientists, mathematicians, and travelers flocked here to deposit centuries of collective wisdom. What was lost? Original works of Aristotle and Socrates' medical knowledge from India and Africa, ancient blueprints for machines, water systems, even steam-powered devices, complete histories of Mesopotamian kings and African kingdoms. Who destroyed it? It wasn't destroyed in a single fire, but over centuries by Julius Caesar's invasion, 48 BCE, Christian mobs during the rise of the Byzantine Empire, Muslim conquests, debated by historians. Each wave didn't just erase scrolls, it buried the legacies of entire civilizations. Chapter 2. The Fire of Nalanda, India's lost scientific heritage. Long before Oxford and Cambridge, India had Nalanda University, a global hub of learning, hosting over 10,000 students and 2,000 teachers. Founded in the 5th century CE, Nalanda had 9-story libraries and attracted scholars from China, Persia, Tibet, and even Greece. Subjects taught: astronomy, philosophy, mathematics, medicine, Sanskrit literature. Who destroyed it? In 1193 CE, Bakhtiar Khilji, a Turkic general, attacked Bihar. When told that Nalanda was just a library, he ordered it burned. The fire reportedly raged for months. Countless manuscripts, many irreplaceable, turned to ash. Modern science still struggles to recover what Nalanda once preserved. Chapter 3. The Mayan Codices, Burned by the Cross. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Americas, they weren't just after gold. They were determined to erase native religions and histories. Under Bishop Diego de Landa, thousands of Mayan codices, books written on bark paper, were publicly burned. De Landa wrote, "We found a great number of books, and since they contained nothing but superstitions and falsehoods of the devil, we burned them all." Only 3 original Mayan codices survive today. What knowledge was lost? Astronomical calendars more accurate than Europe's medical practices and herbal knowledge. Entire dynastic histories, a continent's memory went up in smoke. Chapter 4. The House of Wisdom, Baghdad's Forgotten Renaissance. In the 9th century CE, Baghdad was the center of the intellectual world. The Beit al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom, brought together scholars from all religions, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians, to translate and preserve ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian works. Fields explored: algebra and algorithms, optics and physics, medicine and surgery, philosophy and logic. Then came the Mongols in 1258. When they sacked Baghdad, libraries were dumped into the Tigris River. Eyewitnesses wrote that the river ran black with ink and red with blood. Chapter 5. Timbuktu, Africa's Lost Pages. Many associate Africa with oral traditions, but Timbuktu in present-day Mali defies that stereotype. Between the 13th and 16th centuries, it was a bustling center of Islamic learning, with over 700,000 manuscripts on medicine, astronomy, law, and theology. Topics included planetary motion surgery, trade laws, ancient African empires. Most were destroyed or stolen during Moroccan invasions, 1591, French colonial rule, modern jihadist attacks, 2012-13. Even today, many surviving manuscripts are hidden in underground vaults, slowly decaying. Chapter 6. The Lost Scrolls of the Dead Sea. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled upon ancient scrolls hidden in desert caves near Qumran, Israel. These Dead Sea Scrolls were over 2,000 years old and offered new insights into early Judaism, the origins of Christianity, forgotten sects like the Essenes. But some scrolls were quickly confiscated, bought, or sealed in private religious collections, leading to conspiracy theories. Even now, several scrolls remain unreleased, sparking questions. What's being hidden and why? Chapter 7. Why knowledge is always a threat. Every civilization that burned books or smashed tablets knew one thing: ideas are dangerous. Knowledge challenges power, it liberates, it inspires rebellion, and it holds the powerful accountable. That's why history keeps repeating. The Nazis burned books. Dictators censor the internet. Universities are targeted in coups. The destruction of knowledge isn't just loss, it's control. Chapter 8. What if it had survived? Let's imagine a world where Nalanda's blueprints for medicine survived. Baghdad's scientists laid the foundation for the industrial age. Alexandria's wisdom sparked an early renaissance. Would we have colonized Mars by now? Cured cancer centuries earlier? Avoided wars born out of ignorance? Chapter 9. The hidden knowledge that remains. Even as we mourn what's gone, slivers of hope remain. Scholars are recovering burnt scrolls with infrared tech. Timbuktu's manuscripts are being digitized. Ancient Indian and African texts are resurfacing in private libraries. Lost languages are being decoded with AI. The past speaks, but only if we choose to listen. Final words. The fire can be reversed. The question isn't just what we've lost. It's what will we choose to protect now? Every burned library is a warning. Every recovered scroll is a second chance. Because as long as we keep digging, decoding, and daring to remember, the fire loses its grip on history. Imagine a world where knowledge was infinite, where entire civilizations preserved the blueprints of their minds, in paper, on stone, and through word of mouth. Now imagine all of it burning, cut to blackened ruins. Alexandria, Nalanda, Baghdad. Across history, libraries weren't just buildings. They were civilizations' nervous systems, connecting scholars, scientists, poets, and revolutionaries. But when power feared knowledge, the torches came. Seen, the Library of Alexandria, Egypt. Home to over 400,000 scrolls. Texts from Babylon, Greece, Persia, India. Ideas from across the ancient world gathered in one place. Some say it held blueprints for machines centuries ahead of their time. Others believe it hid scientific truths that would challenge religious orthodoxy. But the flames erased it all, in multiple mysterious fires over centuries. Was it Julius Caesar's siege? Or later, they built pyramids with no cranes. They charted the stars without satellites. They healed wounds without modern medicine. And then, they vanished. Welcome to the forgotten libraries of the ancients, where secrets were written not just in ink and stone, but in the silence that followed their disappearance. This is the story of the lost sciences of ancient civilizations, long before the Renaissance, long before Newton, Da Vinci, and the Enlightenment. The world knew science, but it wasn't our science. It was a fusion of observation, intuition, and spiritual understanding. A different way of seeing reality, one we've ignored or buried. Let's begin in ancient Kemet, what we now call Egypt. Chapter 1. The Wisdom of Kemet, Ancient Egypt. Thousands of years before modern chemistry, Egyptian priests were experimenting with alchemy. They didn't just aim to turn lead into gold, they were studying transmutation, healing elixirs, and the balance between body, spirit, and matter. The Temple of Edfu contains blueprints, not of temples, but of machines, rituals, and cosmic maps that point to lost technologies. Some archaeologists claim these are metaphor, but others, including engineers, believe they hint at real energy systems, maybe even electricity. The so-called Dendera light, a relief carved into a temple wall, shows a device that looks shockingly similar to a bulb. Did they harness static electricity using Nile water and copper? Or are we only seeing what we want to see? What's not up for debate is this. They performed brain surgeries at trepanation that left patients alive. They charted the stars with mathematical precision, and they aligned their massive pyramids to the stars with sub-degree accuracy, without GPS. So the question isn't, did they have science? The real question is, why did we forget? Chapter 2. The Library That Burned the World. The Library of Alexandria was more than just scrolls. It was a repository of every known technology, astronomical theory, medical treatise, and spiritual texts from across Asia, Africa, and the Mediterranean. Some records claim it held over 500,000 texts. Topics included steam power, flying machines, surgical instruments, earthquake prediction, mathematics now lost. We'll never know for sure because it was burned, not once but multiple times, by accident and by design. Why would anyone burn such knowledge? Because knowledge is power, and in the wrong hands it's a threat. The church, empires, and invading armies saw it as heresy. When the scrolls turned to ash, so did centuries of human progress. Chapter 3. India's Vimana Secrets. In ancient Sanskrit texts, the Vedas, there are descriptions of flying machines called vimanas. These weren't metaphors. They included specific details, how they were built. The metals used, their flying patterns, even energy sources, including mercury vortex engines modern physicists scoff. But aeronautical engineers in India and Russia have studied these blueprints seriously. The Vaimanika Shastra, a controversial 20th century rediscovery, outlines flight tech more complex than what we had until the 1900s. Coincidence or memory? India also pioneered plastic surgery, nose reconstruction documented in 600 BCE, cataract operations using needles, advanced mathematics like zero, infinity, and pi. Much of this predates Europe by 1,000 years. Chapter 4. The Andes Code. High in the Andes, the Inca civilization, without the wheel, without writing, built cities on mountaintops like Machu Picchu. Their stonework is so precise that you can't fit a blade between the stones, and they survived earthquakes that toppled modern cities. How? Some believe they used sound technology to soften stone, a theory echoed in Amazonian tribal myths. Quipu, their system of knotted cords, may have been more than accounting. Some believe it was binary code, like early computers. And then, they disappeared. Chapter 5. The Angkor Code. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat was once the largest city on Earth, powered by a vast hydraulic system that managed water in complex seasonal cycles. It was a scientific marvel, capable of sustaining half